Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hanover Forest Seminar Series number X plus a lot. This is Dr. Chemuku Wekesa, who's done course from the Kenya Forestry Research Institute. He is currently the director of the Gede Center, which is where I did my sabbatical in 2012, embedded with Jeffrey, which is where I met him as a young scientist. Mr. Mbuvi, the former director, who he's now usurped 13 years later, said, "Can you take this young guy out with you and kind of shape him into a good forest ecologist?" He's working on a PhD. He has a PhD in natural resources management from Egerton University in Kenya. I was outside my PhD committee. So we spent a lot of time together in the forests of Kenya. He's become a good friend over the years. I saw him recently at the Youth for World Congress last year in Stockholm, and said, "Why don't you come to Michigan State University?" He found some travel funding for himself. This is his first visit to the United States. This is his first stop. He's then going to the University of Kentucky and then Cornell, and then back to Kenya. But yeah. Chemuku, go ahead, tell them what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor McFarland. As he has indicated, I have known him for many years, and he has been part of the team that I can say has contributed to my career in one way or another. And I'm coming from Kenya Forest Research Institute, which is a government research institute in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And we are like the think tank for the ministry and the government on matters forestry. So today, I want to speak about fragmentation and biodiversity conservation and how these affect endangered tree species in Kenya. But before maybe to start off, I would also like to talk about carefree and what we do. And we are a government research institute established in 1986 under Science Technology Act, laws of Kenya. But around 2013, this act was repealed and we were put under Science, Technology and Innovation Act number 28. And this is where my institute is currently anchored. And as an institute, we are sensitive to environmental issues. So we are ISO certified, both for environmental management system and also quality management systems. And these pictures here are just some of our current activities within the Taita Hills landscape, where we are supporting communities to train them on how they can propagate and conserve endangered tree species. So our vision is that to be a center of excellence in forest research and unused natural resources for sustainable development. And our mission is to conduct research in forestry and related natural resources and generate innovations, technologies, and also build the capacity of stakeholders in the field of forestry. This is our head office in Nairobi. I think Professor McFarland, Professor David Scott have been here several times. They have been working with some of our scientists. And as I have indicated, our mandate is mainly to conduct research in forestry, then build capacity of stakeholders in forestry, then also establish partnership and work with other research institutions and organizations, including institutions of higher learning, in join the research and also training. And I think I'm here as part of this to also build a partnership with the Michigan State University, and then also disseminate some of the findings that we have generated over time. So our research approach for K-free is under various thematic areas, and we have 4 main thematic areas. And the first one is on forest productivity, tree health and improvement. And this is, and this is where issues of breeding, agroforestry, biotechnology, pathology issues falls. And then we have the forest biodiversity, environmental management, and climate change. And here we have research on restoration, soil and water conservation, climate change, and also dry land research. And this is the program that I work in as a scientist, besides being the regional director for our Coastal Institute. And then we have the forest products and enterprise development. And this one is mainly on developing the various products from forests and trees, including non-timber forest products. Just like the maple syrup that I received today as a present. If you come to our center in Karura, you'll find a wide range of products made from different forestry related raw materials. Then we have to synthesize this information to inform policy. So we have a program on policy, research, and governance, which also takes into consideration the issues of gender and forestry issues. So all these themes are cascaded to different regions, and we have all these like 5 eco-regional research programs. We have the coast where I coordinate research, and our office is based in Gede, near Malindi. Then we have the one for dry land in Kitui, in the center of the dry areas of the country. Then we have the one for Central Highlands, it is based in Muguga, Nairobi. Then we have the Rift Valley one in Londiani. Then around Lake Victoria, we have another center that is responsible for that western region and part of the Lake Basin region. Then we have the National Forest Product Research Center that is mainly headquartered in Karura, Nairobi, the famous Karura Forest. And that's where we are developing all sorts of products, both non-timber and timber products. And this is just a map of how our offices are distributed in the country. We have 47 counties, but our offices are present maybe in around 15 or so counties, but each office serves a number of counties, a minimum like of 2. So coming back to the topic of today, this is the global perspective of the trees that we have at the global level, and we have about 57,000 different tree species. And out of these 57,000, Brazil has the most, followed by Colombia, Indonesia, in that order. And if you look at that graph, it shows which ones have been evaluated, which ones have not been evaluated, those that have been evaluated and the data is inefficient, is not sufficient enough, then all the way to those that are critically endangered. And if you calculate the total of those endangered against the total number, then we have about 21% of that are endangered. This data is from Botanical Garden Conservation International, which works on trying to conserve tree species globally. And then when you come to my own country, we have about 1,100 native trees, and out of these, 49 are endangered, are endemic, sorry. We can only find them in Kenya. And out of these 1,100, about 150 are threatened or endangered. And this gives us a threat level of about 13.2%. And you realize that most of these endangered trees are found in biodiversity hotspots. And this biodiversity hotspot, most of them happens to occur in the coast region, where we have the Taita Hills forest, the Sacred Kaya forest, and the other coastal lowland forests like Arabuko Sokoke, the Buddha Forest Complex. And so the graph here shows the number in terms of which species are endangered, which ones are of least concern, which ones are threatened. So all those are latest statistics from the Kenya Tree Threatened Trees Consortium, which KEFRI is a member. And you realize that these two ecosystems, the Taita Hills and Sacred Forest, they have this high species diversity and also high level of endemism. But of course, there are also many threats associated with this ecosystem. And some of these threats are like high rate of deforestation, we have degradation, then we have fragmentation. All these are being driven by increasing population, where communities want to expand land for agriculture to produce enough food for themselves. And they are getting into the forest also to cut trees for alternative like income, including for charcoal production. And if you look at this picture here, you see this community here, they are moving up and up and trying to get more space from the forest. And this is one of the forests in Taita Hills, Ngangao. Professor here has been there. And then this is the landscape, and you can see the population over there, which has been growing over time. And for a long time, this particular area had no structured way of being managed. The forests were neither under Forest Act for a long time until around 1977, when there was a presidential decree to stop harvesting of trees from this area. And as I speak, this dam that used to serve the community with water is no longer there because of challenges related to degradation and deforestation and other factors. Since 2024, it has disappeared. So over the years, we lost almost 98% of the forest cover within this Taita Hills landscape. And with that, we are likely to lose the species that occur within this particular landscape. And then when we come to Kayas, these are sacred forests. They are also very small in area. Some are small as 2 hectares, others as big as 200 hectares, and they are also very much fragmented, occurring in very small patches, but of course very important in terms of biodiversity conservation, also in terms of being sacred with the community, where prayers and other traditional functions are held, and they are managed by like this group of guys who are the Kaya clans of elders. So these forests are not under the Forest Act, but rather the National Museum of Kenya Heritage Act. And this places the Kaya elders at the center of management. But of course, like the ones in Taita here, they are also facing the same challenges, despite being very rich in biodiversity, and encroachment, like here in Kaya Kambe, is one of the challenges that we have. So these particular landscapes are important because they have rich genetic materials. Example is the wild coffee that is very important and can be used for breeding program to enhance like resilience to existing coffee for climate change based on diseases. And then they have a wide range of crop relatives. And these crop relatives are used by people as food. And these crop relatives has very high nutrition content. And the forest also help the communities to maintain high level of crop biodiversity. Because with the crop relatives we have here, the communities are able also to domesticate this in their farms and increase the diversity. And some of these species that are there, like Albizia here, Afrocarpus usambarensis, we have Macaranga, are highly endangered because of the ongoing fragmentation. So, and why are we looking at these threatened and endangered tree species is because, of course, they are listed here, but some of them are not covered by international conventions like the CITES, and others are not nationally protected by the Kenyan government. We have a few that are protected, but others are not like protected by the government. Then we have those that, of course, are listed on CITES, but in Appendix 2. So we have to sustainably utilize the species. So all these factors have contributed to us taking action on how we can support the conservation of these tree species. So we have a wide range of those species here. The list is given here in details. So I will not read through all that, including all these that are like the last 6 here are within the Kaya, and as you will see, we have only very few individuals remaining. So over the years, we've been doing all studies to understand their population and understand propagation dynamics, to be able to have information that can help us support the conservation of these tree species. So I will go and share that in a short while. But this is one of the largest trees you find in Taita Hills. It's about 300 years old. And this is a team from Peru that was doing some measurement. And the diameter of this Newtonia puchanani is about 3 or 5 centimeters. So it's very big. So when I go to this resort, like in Kaya, we undertaken like the diversity studies for in the landscape outside the forest. And this is where what we get. We have like 59 different species of indigenous vegetables. We have wild fruits, about 25. We have 3 cereals, all these up to cowpeas and all this. And this landscape is closely supported by the Kaya forest, and you see how this is very important in supporting like their traditional food systems by the community. And then in the forest, we documented 108 tree species, and then among these we have also 82 shrubs, and then in farms the diversity is very limited with about only 6. And for those species that I have listed like endangered, you can see the number of mature individuals, in some cases as low as 3 for mature individuals, and then 1 for sapling, and there are no seedling. That's why we are coming in to work with the communities so that we can increase this population in the natural range through both in situ conservation and also setting up some ex situ conservation initiatives. And of course, the forests have also other endangered species like elephant shrew and even the butterfly species, which are 51 in number. So in our initiative, we are trying to propagate this with the communities to support the community and raise like materials. And when we are doing restoration or replanting in those areas, then we raise materials to take back to the forest. And this is a joint like venture between researchers and the communities. So we set up some community nurseries across board. And as you see, the germination percent here is still low at 40 to 45. And the time is taking is low compared to these other like exotic species. So we are trying like different approaches to enhance this germination percent for this particular species. I picked a few, and also reduce the period so that we can have enough materials that we can be able to take back to the forest. Then we have this African violet, another one, which is also endangered and found in only one of the sites within Bololo on the rocky side. And we've been undertaking studies to understand how we can raise this. And of course, it requires a lot of shade. So we created this within our nurseries and the community nurseries. And for you to get like a good result, then you should avoid like direct sunlight, exposure of these cuttings to direct sunlight. We are getting some good result, but this is an experiment that is still ongoing. And of course, we recommended that for watering, then we have to ensure that it's moderate. Then we have this wild coffee, which we are also trying to support the conservation of this particular species. But the challenge is to get these seeds because of the monkeys and the birds. So what we've done, we have bought some nets, some special nets to protect like this fruit until they mature, so that we at least shed off competition from monkeys and birds. And this gives us an opportunity to harvest some of the seed, of course, only to 25% level. Then we can also germinate. And the behavior is more or less the same with the African violet. So we have to ensure that there is a proper shade for the same. Then we have others here, like Meimekia, and this one we are running this in our nursery, and then this Psychotria with some peat moss growth, just to provide conducive environment to germinate this. Because at the end of the day, we want to have like a manual or a manual that applies community nurseries on how they can go about it to germinate these particular trees in their nurseries, and then we take them back to the natural range to increase their population. And then we've done some studies also to understand how the fragmentation is affecting some of these species, and you realize that the age effect is very significant, and it affects how the dynamics of this particular species. And apart from that, we have other factors like the moisture content that is created along the age effect that has a significant impact in all of these species. Of course, we classified them those into those that are dominant, like Albicius, Sigium, Taparamontana, we have Maesa, all Saimalos. So they respond to the age effect. They are very sensitive to the age effect. So anytime that age effect is created, then we have problems problems in terms of survival of this particular species. And then when we, also here, when we tested even more species, we had around 7 there, and here when we tested even more again, and then you see also the forest age effect being an issue on the survival of this particular species. Again here, when we narrow down to some specifics one, by isolating based on other attributes, again, attributes for those that are not very common, and still the age effect was still there. So fragmentation generally has really had a significant effect on how these species occur. But of course, there is also relationship between the species among themselves and how they relate with each other. And this was only made to guide us on how we can design like the restoration plans within the site, and how we can mix these particular species together. And you see like Maesa, for example, here, being closer to this species called Achelea, and then Taparamontana with Prunus and Nigeria and all that. So all this information has been documented and published, and one can find it in one of our papers, and then you can read the details. Then those threatened species again, you see the age effect having like a very significant impact on their distribution. And then you look at even the densities, and you realize that where the age is in most cases, although not significant, but the densities are lower compared to other sites. Then when we check on how the diversity is, no significance yet, but you can see here we have more of this compared to the age in each of these sites that we've been studying. And we are saying that the interior has more diversity than on the forest edge. Then when we looked at how the forest patch size, because this one is this up to 200, and you check on the diversity level, then the diversity level was higher for those areas, for those fragments that are bigger, meaning that if we continue encroaching those areas, we are likely to bring down the level of biodiversity in terms of the species that we have. And then when we also checked the area and how across those areas, and you see again, it has some significant impact on all those categories that were sampled at different distances across the forest. Then the richness is the same story, and we have the significance is there, and you see Bololo, which is bigger, has higher richness than the rest of the sites. So the fragment site has a bearing on the richness that we get. Then lastly, we checked also moisture, which is a factor of fragmentation because of the microclimate created. And you can see the significance there. And we have, in most cases, it is more drier here, apart from Fururu, which is explained by the rich agroforestry setup across the forest, which kind of mitigate the effect of age effect, because we have a lot of people growing like trees just next to the forest, and you could hardly tell where the boundary is from far unless you get the maps. And then we've generated all these, which you could check online and read about all these publications from the result I have just shared. This book chapter on community needs and biodiversity conservation, and then the paper on these native trees and how they are interacting with the environmental variables along forest edge interior gradient. And then we have these others. This one is the latest for this year on how we can enhance the ecological connectivity through models such as biocultural heritage territory management model. And then we have how the structural diversity regulate microclimate within the Taita Hills. Then also how the structure of the forest and diverse and above ground varies across the gradient. So all these are online, you can check. So in conclusion, we are saying that fragmentation, which is manifested through age effect, influences a lot the trees, the diversity that we have, and there's also interaction among these environmental variables with one another, and also with the distance from the edge. And this also has an impact on how these species are distributed in terms of numbers and also distribution. And the distance and soil moisture are really like the main factor that are responsible for this variation. And the diversity varies along the gradient, and is higher when you go more and more into the forest, up to past like around 100 meters from the edge. And then the large forest fragments have higher species richness and the diversity than smaller one. So every time we are encroaching our forests and reducing the size, then we are reducing our diversity. And we have been working with communities now to support like agroforestry belts along those areas to mitigate the impact of the age effect. And then through like restoration efforts, we are promoting a planting of some trees in farms, and these trees should be nitrogen fixing and mainly indigenous to really connect those small forest patches, because there is also other elements of biodiversity that goes beyond the trees. Like we have some birds that are endangered, we have the elephant shrew, we have the butterfly species that are endangered. So for us to ensure that the ecosystems are connected, and also farmers are able to continue with their farming activities and have reasonable yield, then we need to promote nitrogen fixing trees, but which are indigenous or native to that area, like Albizia being one of them, Macaranga is another. Then we are using this endangered tree species to focus in restoring our degraded areas. We have this 15 billion initiative by the government by 2032, I think. So in this, we want to integrate like this endangered species so that we can also conserve them. We want a certain percentage of the 15 billion trees that are being grown to be covered by those threatened endangered species. So thank you very much. That is the end of my presentation. And this guy is a Kaya kind of elder, and we've had challenges with the young ones who believe that these elders are witchcraft. So they have been attacking the elders and killing some of them. So we have a campaign that says, Movie si uchawi, useni hekima. This is Swahili, meaning that white hair does not necessarily translate to someone being a witch. And when you are old, you have white hair, then you are even more wise. So we want these young guys to also respect these elderly people, and we are trying to bridge this, to bridge the two groups, the Gen Zs and these elders, so that we manage situations whereby we've had some of these elders attacked by young men on the pretext that they are weakest. Thank you very much.
We'll take some questions.
Yes, I can take some questions.
I have a question for you. Start with. So, as you know, Kenya has a lot of the wood productivity comes from exotic plantations like eucalyptus and things like that, which have fast growth rates, which is why people like to plant them. A lot of the communities embrace the idea of planting native species on their land, which might have slower growth rates, or not be as productive for timber production or the products they need to.
Okay, so can I take that or I can take several of them?
No, just answer the questions one at a time.
Okay, but okay, I think you are right. We have those commercial plantations that are highly productive, but we are also working on indigenous species that have relatively faster growth and promoting these native trees that are fast growing in farmlands. Example is what I have given, Albizia pomifera, for example. It can take up to 12, 13 years, and you will have a diameter of about 25, say 20 to 30 centimeters, depending on management practices and also the site condition. We have also Melia Polkensi, and we have huge breeding programs to even bring down the maturity period of such a species. So with that and the sensitization that we are involved in together with other conservation stakeholders, these species are being picked up by communities, and you see them a lot on farms when you drive across the country. And Albizia is mainly for high potential, and Melia is for areas that are semi-arid or relatively drier. And so far, so good. The two species are working, and CAFE is also working on other species so that it can expand a wide range of various indigenous species that can also be of commercial value.
Thanks.
I have a question from the online, Dr. Danny Olsen, and she's wondering what's going on the community involvement in forest management and conservation. And she's wondering, is there anything like the community conservation effort for wildlife, for animals?
Okay, thank you. I think we've had very progressive, progressive legislation to support community engagement in conservation, both on forestry, on fisheries, front, even on wildlife. So, like the Wildlife Act of 2030 provides for co-management, and communities are allowed to participate in conservation under a framework that allows the community also to draw some benefit from conservation activity. And this act also allows for wildlife, for setting up of conservancies, community-based conservancies, and in many community-based conservancies in the country where tourists can come, for example, and the conservancies will generate income through many other aspects of tourism, including providing banders for accommodation, tour guiding, and even the wildlife, seeing wildlife within those conservancy. So they are spread all over the country in areas where we have wildlife, especially the drier areas. In terms of forest, we have the Community Forest Association, and the Community Forest Association also allows communities to actively participate in forest management. And for each forest ecosystem, for example, community will go into different user rights groups, and those user rights groups are licensed to undertake those non-destructive activities within the forest. And some of the user rights, for example, would be like having beekeeping in the forest. You put your beehives there, then you get honey, packaged and sell. Other user rights, if it's a forest reserve, will include things to do with tour guiding. And there are others involved, like in Arapuko Sokote, with butterfly farming. We have a huge butterfly farm, and the community will mop up the butterfly and export the pupa to Europe. I don't know what they use it for, but I'm told during the ceremonies, then they can release this butterfly and something like that. So it's mainly for those ceremonies. And then those who are in fisheries, we have beach management units, which is an equivalent of a community-owned initiative. And these beach management units work hand in hand with Kenya Fisheries Services. Then they can co-manage area, maintain cleanness, avoid pollution, then enforce those fishing requirements, because there are different sizes of nets allowed for different areas. So you have to adhere to all this. So our laws provide all this. Of course, there are issues of conflict. For example, where in the sea, where we have beach management units, then we have mangrove forest. So we have Community Forest Association responsible for mangrove forest. Then we have beach management unit for now fisheries, and all are conserving that area. So there have been those small conflicts that needs to be worked on, but of late they are allowing like members of beach management units to also be members of Community Forest Association, so that you belong to both, because the vision, the objective is one. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one, two more questions.
This is kind of similar with respect to just a question about the community. So you mentioned towards the end that you are trying to get farmers to put more trees on your property. I'm curious how receptive they are to those recommendations, and if they are not receptive, how do you incentivize their participation in those initiatives?
Okay. Initially, we had challenge with like getting farmers to embrace agroforestry there, because we were only offering like those native trees. Then at some point after engagement, we realized that they wanted more than that. And we brought on board like other fruit trees, macadamia, for example, for the nuts, then hash, avocado. So with the addition of those fruit trees, now they are embracing. So we are having a mixture of those indigenous and all those fruit trees. And the macadamia is highly valued, like within the heritage landscape. So we have the companies that come and buy it. So every time we are negotiating with the farmers to allow us some few meters of their land to put agroforestry them. One of the species that we give them is macadamia, and hash over that. Yeah, so that has made the farmers now to be positive and to buy the, yeah, the initiative. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have two questions, actually. Thank you for your talk, very interesting. The first question is, when you talk about your edge effects, what are you talking about in terms of the distance for the edge itself? 500 meters or something like that? And then the second question is related to that in some way. So you seem to imply that the edge effect is light limitation or light intolerance, actually. But what do you know about that? Is the edge effect derivative of light situation, or is it temperature, or some other condition like factors like the soil condition? So do you know anything about what the edge effect is being driven by?
Okay, I will start by the first question. For the purpose of this particular study, the edge effect is 50 meters. Yeah, 50 meters. That represents the edge effect. We borrowed this from what the other studies have recommended, and like in the Amazon, and they wanted to confirm this, like confirmatory studies. But in terms of this edge effect, how it manifests, one is the moisture level, because we analyze our moisture level in the soils along the edge, and it was lower and limiting. And remember, this is a high potential area where the species are adapted to very high level of moisture. But of course, the light also, because some of the species that are like shade loving, you wouldn't find them on the edge. When you create an edge and it's open, then the number of those species, you find them getting lower and lower. We did go to the level of temperature. Maybe that is something in the future we may need to maybe do this study and try to see how it manifests in terms of the edge.
I got another question from online. It's about the government policies and how effective have government policies been in regulating logging activities and preventing unauthorized or illegal loggings?
I think so far the policy has not worked well. And the reason being, I think, is the issue of politics, because sometimes the politicians will overlook the policy and just make pronouncement to win over the supporter. And we've had bans by the government since 2018. Those who have been following forest issues in the country. In 2018, around February, we had a ban on logging, but this ban was not informed by any data, any information. And it created a lot of problems because like we had some millers who had taken like loans and invested in machinery in readiness for harvesting of clean and for production. They lost all this, and even those who had their material in the forest could not remove it. And this ban was done in a way that was not participatory, given that our constitution allows any decision to be participatory in nature. But sometimes politicians jump these steps and just make pronouncements. So it has been an issue. We have good policy, but with a lot of interference from politicians, especially those on power at the top. So that has made those policies not to really work very well. And like when the ban was imposed, there was the issue of charcoal, for example. And we've written about it. And the ban even covered the charcoal sector. And no one was allowed to produce charcoal. But of course, charcoal was still being used in the country a lot by everyone. Because you go to a restaurant and you order nyama choma, for example, roasted meat, then how do you treat it? Then you need charcoal. And there were issues where Kenyans would go cross over to Uganda, for example, get a permit for charcoal to just demonstrate the charcoal is originating from Uganda. Come and get charcoal from the local setup and use the Ugandan permit to distribute. So, but if the policies were well followed and participatory, allowing stakeholders to give their input, then we could have like good direction on how to manage the situation. So the ban had even more negative implication to the forest than before because of the way it was done. And we lost a lot of trees and the forest area because of the way it was done. Thank you. There was another question from there.
Well, thank you very much. It went back to that issue you talked about the product. One of the things is production and product. So I wanted to check how much carefully goes down to the demand side dynamics of forest expression. Like the efficient use of the wood for stove production, but also on the policy side, I don't know, bans charcoal or production bans really haven't worked anywhere. Especially in our context where the long arm of the law is quite short, actually, because it's just the capacity issues as well as the politics, it just really can't enforce now. In Kenya, for instance, are there regulated, is there a regulated use of forests for charcoal production, for example, recognizing the demand for cooking?
I think before the ban, there was a regulated way because we had charcoal rules for I think 209 or thereabout that were developed by Kenya Forest Service, and they were working because for you to sell charcoal, you needed certificate of origin showing where is the charcoal coming from. And if the charcoal is coming from point A, that then the people at that point A should be belonging to a charcoal producing association. And the group should have like a tree nursery and they are involved in restoration and the tree planting activity. So all that was being done. But when the ban was imposed, it stopped. It was like everyone for himself or herself. The government realized that mistake. Now they are back on the charcoal rules, but they are revising them, given that 209 is many years ago and many things have changed. So they are currently working on new charcoal regulation to streamline the sector so that it can be regulated. On the demand side, not much has been done to understand how much like charcoal is being used. We still have a huge gap. Of course, there are efforts to promote like efficient cooking stove and efficient carbonation killings that can reduce wastage. But we also need to know the trend in usage and really try to document this. so that we can use the information to make the sector even better. Okay.
Okay, well, let's all thank, Dr.